Hello, everyone. I'll be telling you about Gil Kane's His Name is Savage and how this short spy action comic is important to the history of self publishing in comics, the terminology of graphic novel, and creators struggling for more artistic freedom in the comics business. Gil Kane is most famous for designing the modern versions of Green Lantern and the Atom for DC in the 60s. You can see their previous counterparts in the corners there, but he was also infamous for being very vocal in his criticisms of the quality of comics and the way the comic book industry was run. His friend Gary Groth would later put it that his incessant criticism leveled at the miserable quality of writing in comics, combined with his animadversions against corporate policies, made him odd man out, a thorn in the side of businessmen as well as his fellow professionals. And on the left there is an excerpt from Roy Thomas's fanzine Alter Ego, where Kane, said that while the drawing in comics he thought was extremely sophisticated, the writing was extremely banal and primitive. So he was super unsatisfied with the limits on the types of stories that he could tell. This is also the time of the Comics Code, when censorship in comics was high, and there weren't really any alternatives besides Marvel and DC for him to go work at. This is just the two covers for the interviews Kane did in Alter Ego and later in the Comics Journal. I just love them so much. They're both portraits of Gil drawn by Marie Severin. And I realize these last few slides have had Kane's face plastered all over them. I promise we'll get to comics in the next slide, and you may be surprised the next time we see Gil Kane's face in this presentation. Kane said that he wanted to do a complete novel in comics, not something that was written in 12-page segments or, multiple stories in the same book. And this is why he considers it to be an early or even the first graphic novel. He was also very interested in incorporating prose better than mainstream comics had, citing Harvey Kurtzman's work at EC as the best things he had ever read in comics. And you can really see the similarity between this page from Savage and this page by Kurtzman. Kane said that text in comics should give you an image that doesn't displace the picture, but augments it so that you get insight into the picture that didn't exist before, very much like those Kurtzman stories do. Here's the opening to His Name is Savage, and according to Kane, this book was done completely within 30 days. It's a 42-page book within 30 days, also while still working at both Marvel and DC and producing work for them. Whether or not the 30 days thing is true, the working at Marvel and DC at the same time thing definitely is. The prose in Savage, the script, is actually written by Archie Goodwin from a plot by Kane, and he's credited under a pseudonym in the first printing, but is credited under his real name in a later Fantagraphics reprint that we will get to later. Kane modeled Savage after the actor Lee Marvin in the movie Point Blank, which had been adapted from Donald Westlake's first Parker novel, The Hunter, which is kind of the same genre of book that this, crime thriller spy story is operating in. The cover artist Robert Foster straight up just painted Lee Marvin, and compare and contrast that with the inside example there by Kane, where the likeness isn't one-to-one. Now, Savage had super low distribution, and the unauthorized use of Marvin's likeness had nothing to do with this, though. There's no evidence that he knew the comic existed. Kane's theory was that there was actually sabotage from other companies that subscribed to the Comics Code. There were 200,000 copies printed, only 20,000 distributed. So here's your example for why this couldn't have the Comics Code. It was published by Adventure House Press, by the way. But you got Savage shoving a gun through this guy's mouth and breaking his teeth. Awesome. With the descriptive text, as I was saying earlier. Now, Kane maintained in multiple interviews that other comics publishers called up printing companies and warned them about the violent pornography Kane was trying to have them print, and suddenly no printers would take it. Distributors also got the word that it was a trouble item, according to Kane in the Comics Journal. He said, we would be millionaires if we could sue the whole industry, but there was no paper no telephone calls. So there's no proof that printers and distributors didn't just make the call because of the content on their own. But the book did have a super low distribution in the end. Right after, Gil Kane did this book called Black Mark, which is another graphic novel, this time more fantasy, first published by Bantam Books, and then later, 30 years later actually, was reprinted by Fantagraphics Books. A sequel to Black Mark was published in Marvel Preview in 1979, and this sequel is included in the Fantagraphics reprint. Here are the cover proofs for the unproduced second and third issues of Savage. That's as far as they got. And this is a sketch for the opening to the second issue. And that brings us to, there he is, Gil Kane, this time in a comic book. His name is Kane. This was published in House of Mystery number 180, and it was when Kane was actually in the process of leaving DC over a disagreement with Carmine Infantino over his page rate, but he was still desperate for work and ended up getting assigned to draw this story that makes fun of himself, shows him as a narcissistic artist who's so obsessed with the quality of his work, his genius, and he is tormented by editors and ultimately literally trapped inside of his artwork, inside of the limiting medium that he had been so vocal about his dissatisfaction with. There's Joe Orlando up top, and down here these little guys, these little demons that are doing the penciling and inking and ruining Gil Kane's artwork, making it conform to a house style, are drawn with little Carmine Infantino heads. You've stopped hurling insults, eh, Gil? No wonder. You have broken the divine right of editors, and for that we shall have our revenge. And so, yeah, here's the cover for the reprint of Savage in 1982 by Gil Kane, losing the Lee Marvin likeness. Here is the only other Savage story by Gil Kane from an issue of Anything Goes in 1986. Is a 4-page silent story that also promises the return of Savage, but that never came to pass. Finally, there's this wild book by Alan Moore and Gil Kane in 1998, part of this Judgment Day series that Moore was doing with Rob Liefeld at the time for his Awesome Comics line. The stories in this issue, the multiple stories, are observed by this Imagineer who enters the fictional realm itself. And it's implied that this is how comics creators really do their work. And this specific Imagineer, his name is Kane. Just like that House of Mystery story, just like Savage, obviously. The final page references the House of Mystery story, saying that if Kane really is imprisoned here in this world of comics, then no freedom ever was so sweet as this. There's also this great moment where Kane asks one of the fictional residents that if they have any cowboy stories for him, to which the character responds that cowboy books don't sell, dude. Everyone knows that. It's poking fun at the limiting nature of the comics business that Alan Moore was obviously very familiar with at this point. Similar to the House of Mystery story, but obviously way more sympathetic to Kane. So in summary, His Name is Savage is a fascinating artifact in the evolution of comics, and inspired these two fascinating comics that reflect the ongoing dialogue of creators' rights and artistic freedom in the industry. Thanks for watching.